Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent to be able to speak in morning business for up to 10 minutes.
The Senate is in a quorum call.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
And that I be allowed to speak in morning, as if in morning business for 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I was surprised a bit, or you're never totally surprised in this body, when my Democrat colleagues are saying this morning that something bad has happened because the historic budget that would change the debt course of America that has been announced by Congressman Paul Ryan and his House Budget Committee today violates the Budget Control Act. It spends a few $billion less than what was capped in the Budget Control Act. But the Budget Control Act that passed, it did put a cap on spending a little over $1 trillion next year for discretionary spending only. That $1 trillion plus cap, they were reducing the spending by 10 or 15 or 19 billion in their proposed budget today. If this somehow violates the good spirit around here and is the wrong thing. But I would just say, we all knew when that Budget Control Act passed in the wee hours of the morning, at the 11th hour, the 59th minute before a government shutdown occurred, we knew it wasn't enough reduction in spending. It wasn't half of what experts have told us need to be reduced over the next 10 years to put America on a sound debt path. We are on a disastrous debt path. We're heading to the most predictable financial crisis this nation has ever faced because we are spending 40 cents per dollar more than we have. We're borrowing 40 cents of every dollar that we spend, borrowing it, just to maintain this level of spending. So the House made some changes or made a proposal to reduce the spending level below the Budget Control Act. And they also recognized that the $1 trillion or so in spending that was covered by the Budget Control Act, and that is the discretionary spending, is only a little over 40% of total spending. Over half of the spending is in the entitlement mandatory spending category. And they proposed on the Budget Control Act nothing really there to make any changes. So the Ryan budget proposed to spend $180 billion next year, less than the President's budget that he submitted earlier this year proposed. And did the President's budget adhere to the BCA? My colleagues are, they're just mostly disheartened that Republicans would take the spending down below the level by about $19 billion or so under the Budget Control Act numbers. But I didn't hear them complaining when President Obama submitted his budget. You know what the President's budget did? It wiped out over half of the spending cuts in the Budget Control Act. Can you imagine that? We agreed on $2.1 trillion in spending reductions. $1 trillion of that was voted on explicitly, and $1.1 trillion was an automatic sequester or automatic cut in spending if the committee didn't reach a long-term agreement. The committee didn't reach an agreement, so automatically $1.1 trillion in cuts were to be imposed. That's the current law. President Obama's budget wipes it out. Not only does he add, therefore, $1.1 trillion immediately to spending as a result of wiping out the sequester that we agreed on just last August, he adds another $500 billion in spending. His budget that he submitted just a few weeks ago calls for spending increases of $1.6 trillion more than was in the Budget Control Act. And so my good friend, Senator Conrad, who chairs the Budget Committee, and our Democratic leadership that are threatening a government shutdown because Congressman Ryan and a responsible House Budget Committee proposed actually taking a few more $1 billion out of discretionary spending, They want to complain about that. I didn't hear them complaining when we had the most astounding event. After the President signed the Budget Control Act, it passed by both houses at the 11th hour, a compromise agreement, a compromise we all knew was not sufficient. 5 months later, before the ink is hardly dry on it, he proposes to wipe it out. No wonder the American people don't trust Congress. We say in August we're going to save $2.1 trillion. Trust us. And we're going to raise the debt ceiling so America can continue to borrow at this extraordinary rate. But we're going to cut spending. We're going to raise it, but don't worry, we've promised and we've cut spending. And the President of the United States, within 5 months of that agreement being reached, submits us a budget that wipes out half of it. I'm amazed nobody's been talking about it. I've tried to raise the issue, and it just points out to me how silly it is that our colleagues here in the Senate would complain about Congressman Ron. The American people gave the Republican a majority in the House of Representatives. We are facing the most systemic debt threat this nation has ever faced. And they knew it. And they proposed last year and again this year a historic budget that would alter the debt course we're on, take us from unsustainability to sustainability, take us on a path that we would hope avoid a debt crisis. Although we're so close to it, I'm not sure we can avoid it. Hopefully we can. That we can avoid a debt crisis, but our debt is tremendous. Our individual per capita debt is $44,000 per man, woman, and child, greater than any country in Europe, greater than Greece. We're in the danger zone. Clearly we are. So they proposed this budget last year and again this year, and it laid out a plan. So what happened? The President of the United States calls Congressman Ron and castigates him in a speech, and he's sitting right in front of him. The Senate Democrats, who haven't produced a budget in 3 years because they're afraid to, because they haven't got the courage to lay out the tough choices that are going to be necessary to save this republic financially, they attacked Congressman Ron and his House members for trying to do the right thing. It's unbelievable to me. I'm just amazed. And now we have them complaining that he goes a little below the Budget Control Act numbers. Give me a break. Does not anybody know what's going on here? The American people do. They gave a shellacking to a lot of the big spenders in the last election. Surely we would have thought Congress got the message. The House did. Apparently the Senate is not. Senator Reid, our majority leader, he said it'd be foolish to have a budget. Foolish to have a budget? The law requires us to have a budget. By April 1st, we should have one in the committee. We're not going to be meeting before then. And we should have one passed both houses by April 15th. That's the law in the United States Code. Unfortunately, I guess we don't go to jail as a result of not passing one because we hadn't passed one here for 3 consecutive years. Hadn't passed a budget in 3 years. Senator Reid said it's foolish to pass one. Why? I think he meant politically. It'd be foolish for him to allow a budget to come to the floor where there's free debate, an opportunity to offer amendments in large numbers, and actually debate the challenges and vote on them. Senators in public, not in secret meetings, but in public, actually vote on these issues that are important to America and be held accountable. And the American people can see how tough the choices are because the choices are tough. It's not going to be easy to balance this budget. I'm telling you. I've seen the numbers. I'm ranking Republican on the Budget Committee, and I've sat down with my staff, and I wish I could say it would be easier than it is. It's not going to be easy. Mr. President, this is a frustrating moment. I'm not really surprised that here we are, going into the summer, trying to deal with a financial systemic threat to America that Admiral Mullen calls the greatest threat to our national security, our debt. And we've done nothing about it. The House has. The Republican leadership in the House has done their duty. They produced a courageous, thoughtful, responsible debt course change that will put us on the road to prosperity, not decline. Their budget includes tax simplification and tax reductions even, while they are doubling the amount of savings that President Obama achieves. The House budget, although it doesn't balance in 10 years, and I wish it did, but it doesn't balance in 10 years, but it adds half the debt in the next 10 years that President Obama's budget proposed. Cuts it in more than half. It puts us on a path. And in the out years, it's even more positive in its effect and clearly takes us out of this disastrous course we're on. So they should be congratulated for being honest and detailed. And speaking of details, why don't we see the Democratic members of this Senate lay out their budget plan? Why not? Last year, Senator Reid calls up the House budget so all could vote against it. So Senator McConnell called up the President's budget. Every Democratic member voted against that. Senator Toomey's thoughtful budget.
The Senator has used more than 10 minutes, 11.
Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent to speak one additional minute.
Without objection.
So the net result was that the President's plan was brought up, voted down 98 to nothing. All Democrats voted against the Toomey plan. All of them voted against the House plan. They voted against everything. Not one plan did they produce that they voted for. And that's the course we're on today. And I don't think that's a plan and a policy you can be proud of. I think it's unworthy of a party given leadership in the United States Senate at this critical time in history. I thank the Chair and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I've returned to the Senate floor today to talk about what is a true crisis for many Louisianians, many Americans, which is the ever-rising price of gasoline at the pump. This hits everybody in their tough pocketbook in a horrible economy. And so it really is a true crisis for many American families all around the country. Now, in this debate, and it has been a significant national debate, a lot of Republicans say, well, President Obama doesn't have a plan, doesn't have a policy to address the price at the pump. A lot of supporters of President Obama say, well, no president can really have a significant impact, can determine the price at the pump. Mr. President, I think both of those statements are equally wrong. I think the President, this administration, they do have a policy. They have made specific proposals, and it would, if we enact it, have a significant impact on the price at the pump. It would just be the wrong sort of impact. It would drive the price even higher than it is now, not help American families by stabilizing that price. I wanted to focus on one very specific, clearly laid out policy of President Obama, and that is to increase taxes on oil and gas and energy producers, increase taxes on that product, which I think clearly is going to only drive up the price at the pump. Mr. President, President Obama has advocated this very consistently for a long time. He advocated as a United States Senator. He laid it out as a central plank of his energy policy when he was originally running for president in 2008. And he's fought for it ever since, including it in every budget submission to Congress. He's always advocated increasing taxes on domestic oil and gas energy producers. To underscore this point, one of the President's biggest supporters in the U.S. Senate, President Menendez, has introduced this concept in the Senate just yesterday. Senator Menendez introduced the Repeal Big Oil Tax Subsidies Act just yesterday, which again does exactly the same thing as the President has long advocated. It increases taxes on that product. It increases taxes on those domestic producers. Now, Mr. President, I think the American people get it. Now, we can argue about fairness, we can argue about other considerations, but in terms of the impact this is going to have on the price at the pump, I think the American people get it. It's economics 101. If you tax something more, you tend to drive the price up in the market and you decrease supply. And again, that's economics 101. Now, I could talk about the true facts of this with regard to energy companies, the fact that they pay an effective tax rate of about 41%, the fact that they account for 10%, enough revenue to cover 10% of our entire discretionary budget, that they're not undertaxed at all by any reasonable comparison. But I'm not going to focus on that because, Mr. President, quite frankly, I don't care about the direct impact on the companies. I care about the direct impact on Louisianians, on Americans, on consumers, on what so many middle-class, lower-middle-class families are dealing with right now, that real crisis I talked about that you face every time you go to fill up your car. And that is the burden of skyrocketing prices at the pump. That's what we should all be concerned about. As I said, I think it's pretty obvious, it's economics 101, that if you tax something more, the price at the pump, the price in the market goes up, and you get less of it. But even if that weren't so obvious, we have history to look at, and there is a very clear history lesson from the Carter years when this same experiment was actually enacted. Back then, in 1979, it was called the windfall profits tax. You may remember that debate. Well, that was actually enacted here in Congress, here in Washington, the Crude Oil Windfall Profits Tax Act. It was passed back then, and it went into effect April 2nd of 1980. Again, same arguments, same policy. Somehow, tax treatment of these companies is unfair. Somehow they're not paying their fair share, even though the facts show otherwise. So we're going to increase the tax on those domestic energy producers. Well, what happened? The first thing that happened is that the price at the pump went up. It went up significantly for several years. Now, there's a lot going on in the world at the same time. I know folks will point to developments in the Middle East and everything else, but that's what happened immediately following the enactment of that law. The price went up by about 50%, stayed there for several years. But let's look at other factors. You can argue about the impact of politics and developments in the Middle East on price. What about things that shouldn't be so impacted by developments in the Middle East? What about things like domestic production and whether that increased or decreased? Well, in fact, as a direct result of the windfall profits tax, domestic oil and gas production, energy production, went down over that entire period from between 3 to 6%. If you look at the entire period of the tax, it went down. Now, in this debate, everyone at least has paid lip service to the idea that we should be producing more energy here at home. And yet, in this historical example, in this experiment, increasing the tax on this product did what you would expect it to do, again from Economics 101. It decreased that activity here at home. It decreased domestic production. What else did it do? Well, the second big impact that it had is increased our dependence on foreign oil. Again, you can connect the dots. This is exactly what you would expect. You increase taxes on domestic production, you decrease that supply, and guess what? We're even more dependent on those unstable foreign sources that we want to get away from. That's exactly what happened in the Jimmy Carter experiment. He passed the windfall profits tax, and during the entire tenure of that tax, dependence on foreign oil increased significantly, between 8 and 16%. And then something that might be a little less obvious is impact on revenue. There were enormous promises made about the revenue this windfall profits tax would bring in. Well, at the beginning, it did have that impact, but guess what? Over time, that impact declined enormously, down to actually zero net revenue increase by 1987. Now, the tax was eventually repealed in 1988, but this impact on revenue went down to zero before that repeal, not because of the repeal, went back to zero in 1987. This purple is what was promised. This purple is the increase in revenue that was promised and projected by President Carter. This gray is what happened. Sure, an immediate spike, and then guess what? Domestic energy producers react. They do less activity here. You tax something more, you get less of it. We're more dependent on foreign sources. We drive out that activity, those jobs, and that revenue. And so a steady decline until it's actually zero net additional revenue in 1987, leading to the repeal in 1988. So, Mr. President, I would hope when we look at this proposal, I would hope first we focus on the American people. We focus on their plight every time they go to fill up their gas tank, ever-increasing prices, and our top goal is to give them relief. Increasing taxes on that product, increasing taxes on domestic producers of energy is not going to give them relief. It's going to do exactly the opposite. Every rule of economics says that. You tax something more, you get less of it, you increase the price in the market, and history proves that. A very clear lesson from the Carter years that some folks on this Senate floor, President Obama, others want to repeat. This is not good policy if we truly want to help the American people with their everyday struggle of the price at the pump. I think what's going on is a completely different agenda. Folks are so set against fossil fuel. Folks want to advantage newer forms of energy so much that they're willing to resort to actually increasing the price at the pump to do it. That's exactly what Secretary of Energy Chu advocated in late 2008, right before he was appointed to his present position. Let's not do that. The American people can't afford it. They need relief. They need it now. And an American president can make a difference. Unfortunately, this one has a policy that would make a difference in the wrong direction. Taxing something more increases the price, produces less of it. We need to be doing the opposite. We need to be increasing domestic supply, bringing down the price, helping the American people right in their everyday struggles with their family budgets, with how to manage their scant resources in a very, very tough economy. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I rise to talk about the Cantwell-Johnson-Graham amendment that's going to be voted on shortly in this series of votes that we're going to be having, and to urge my colleagues to support this important amendment that would reauthorize the Ex-Im Bank for 4 years until 2015. And the current authorization is set to expire in May of this year, so it's very urgent that we pass this authorization, and it would increase capacity for the bank because there is demand. The Ex-Im Bank, people may know, or maybe not know, supplies credit stability to foreign purchases of U.S. product where those purchases have limited access to, the purchaser has limited access to private sector capital due to political risk or instability or limited access to capital. And it's something we've had since 1934. So this program has been a way for U.S. manufacturers, small businesses, a variety of U.S. companies to make sure that they get sales of their products in international markets. So it's been an incredibly important tool. Somebody called it one of the most important toolboxes in U.S. economic capacity to help our economy. In 2011, the bank supported over $41 billion in U.S. exports from over 3,600 U.S. companies, and it supported nearly 290,000 export-related jobs in America. So that's a very, very big impact, and according to the Congressional Budget Office, the reauthorization of this program will help reduce the deficit by over $900 million over the next 5 years. That's right, a program that's run by the government that actually helps our deficit be reduced, and that is because of the amount of money that is made from these transactions and returned to the Treasury. So I want to thank my colleagues, Senators Johnson, Graham, Shelby, Warner, Schumer, Brown, Hagan, Coons, Akaka, Murray, Landrieu, Kerry, Kirk, Durbin, Shaheen, McCaskill, Lieberman, and Casey for all sponsoring this important amendment. Now, the reason why we're out here is to make sure that our colleagues know this is the 25th time that this legislation has been up for extension since its original executive order establishing it. And I'm looking at the record here. 1983, passed by voice vote on the reauthorization, passed by unanimous consent. 1992, again, passed by unanimous consent many of these times. So here's a program that for over the last several decades has been passed by unanimous consent, and yet all of a sudden this legislation is being stalled or held up. And what I want to make sure my colleagues know is what an important tool it is for job creation and why it's so important that we not take the capital that's left over in the EXIM program and delay it, because what's going to happen if we don't get this reauthorization done right away is that they're going to stop the activity that is actually helping job creation in the United States. So as you can see here, in 2011, the total number of jobs that it helped support was nearly 300,000 jobs. So that's a pretty good impact by basically saying, as a program of a financing of last resort, the United States is going to make sure that U.S. companies can get their product sold in various marketplaces. That's why the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, many companies and organizations are supporting this legislation. And at an added bonus, as I said, it is generating revenue to the U.S. economy. In fact, it has generated a lot of money, $3.7 billion for U.S. taxpayers since 2005. And I know some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle think the program could have more transparency. I'm all for more transparency for the EXIM Bank, but I would like, if one of my colleagues can figure out with more transparency how to get more than $3.7 billion to the U.S. Treasury out of a government program, I'd love to hear about it, because this is a program that has worked successfully. So let's talk about some of the places that these jobs were created, actually supported and helped sustain. In Pennsylvania, in 2011, $1.4 billion in export products were helped to be purchased by the EXIM Bank and supported over 9,000 jobs in the state of Pennsylvania. So there is help and support for those small businesses, those manufacturers in Pennsylvania that want to access international markets, but there's purchasers, just like with the SBA program or other finance programs, needed to help and support in getting the financing done. Let's look at Massachusetts, another robust state. $566 million in exports in 2011. That was over 4,000 jobs supported through this EXIM program. In my state, there's many jobs, and you can see from looking at the list of the companies that helped got support through this, you know, you have, obviously, aviation has done very well with having this kind of financing, particularly competing in a big global market where other countries have this kind of financing tools. But you also have a lot of small businesses. You have clean tech, you have agriculture, you have seafood, a lot of different companies. Texas, probably another state that's been a huge winner in having the Ex-Im program. 35,000 jobs supported by the Ex-Im Bank in Texas, and over almost $5 billion, $4.9 billion of business that was done in the state of Texas through this program. So my colleagues can see that this is a very, very viable and important program to get reauthorized. So I know some people think that we ought to hold it up, and some are saying let's just stop the program altogether. Stop it and get rid of it. Even though it's been around, it's been a tool, it's been authorized many times on unanimous consent, but now all of a sudden some people think that this program hasn't served the American public and the American job economy very well. I would differ with them. It has served us very well. Another example, Florida. It has, in 2011, helped support $1.1 billion of Florida product sold in international markets and helped support over 7,600 jobs in that state. So again, a big boost to that economy. Let's look at North Carolina. North Carolina, thank you. North Carolina, it has helped support over 3,300 jobs and over $456 million in exports. What I also like about this is that for the first time with this legislation, the textile industry is going to get a member of the Export-Import Bank. So that is to further help export products from places like North Carolina and South Carolina get access to the marketplace and to make sure that they're being competitive on an international basis. And the last chart, Ohio, which is over $398 million and 2,888 jobs. So all of these are important jobs for our economy. And as I said earlier, this program is expiring in May, and so if we fail to reauthorize it now, what we're going to run into is the Export Bank cutting off those types of businesses, those types of jobs in the very near future, because they're almost at their capacity for this year. So instead of saying Washington or Florida products or Ohio products or Pennsylvania products ready for sale, basically what we're going to say is U.S. products in a warehouse waiting for opportunity. We're basically going to say that the door is basically shut on selling these products because we haven't gotten our job done in making sure the export program is reauthorized. So I hope that my colleagues will realize that around here, very few things are getting done very efficiently. There are lots of things being held up, and the U.S. economy is paying the price for it. If we can't push something like the Ex-Im Bank through this process that, again, has been authorized and reauthorized so many times, either by UC or voice vote, and all of a sudden we're going to turn it into a political football, then the American economy is going to pay the price for that. And so I urge my colleagues to help us get this Cantwell-Johnson-Graham amendment passed out of the Senate today and on its way to the House so that we can expedite the process of making sure that we don't have a sign across America, U.S. products stuck in warehouse. Instead, we have a sign that says U.S. exports on the gain, the United States making great headway and selling great products and services around the globe. So I know my colleagues earlier today were saying, well, you know, there are some things that people want to change. The amendments that people want to offer in this legislation are people who want to stop this program. This legislation has transparency. It has improvements that have been recommended on market-based rates, and it puts the United States in a competitive advantage to make sure that we are competing in a world in which export market opportunity has grown something like 500 times in the last 25 years. So if we want to be in the jobs game, we've got to get our products overseas. The Ex-Im Bank will continue to help us do that. I urge my colleagues to support the Cantwell-Johnson-Graham amendment.
Mr. President,
Leader.
as the Senate is aware, there's differences between the Senate's and the House work product on the Stock Act. This legislation limits insider trading by members of Congress. It certainly would have been my preference to work out these differences between the two houses through a conference committee. I know that's the preference of the Republican leader. That's the usual practice. But we've been advised that there would be objection to going to conference by consent. Tried it and tried it, tried it. We can't break through that. That means it would take filing and adopting 3 separate cloture petitions over a course of weeks to get to conference. That is, if you could be successful on the first 2. But we need to address this issue more quickly, because otherwise we don't address it at all, and we need to address it. Mr. President, as a consequence, I'm going to, in a few minutes, file cloture on a motion to concur with the House bill on the Stock Act. It's my hope that we can resolve this matter expeditiously. I hope that we can thereby make clear Congress's intent to prohibit insider trading by members of Congress. Mr. President, I now ask the Chair to lay before the Senate a message from the House with respect to S-2038.
The Chair lays before the Senate the following message from the House.
Resolved that the bill from the Senate, S-2038, entitled An Act to Prohibit Members of Congress and Employees of Congress from Using Non-Public Information derived from their official positions for personal benefit and for other purposes, do pass with an amendment.
Mr. President, I move to concur in the House amendment to S-2038.
The clerk will report the motion to concur.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to concur in the House amendment to S-2038.
Is nays on that motion, Mr. President?
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a cloture motion at the desk.
Clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the Reed motion to concur in the House amendment to S-2038, the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act, signed by 22 senators as follows.
I ask for the reading of the names be waived, Mr. President.
Without objection.
I move to concur in the House amendment to S-2038 with an amendment.
The clerk will report the amendment with a motion to concur.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to concur in the House amendment to S-2038 with an amendment numbered 1940.
I ask for the yeas and nays on my motion.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1941 to amendment numbered 1940.
Mr. President, I have a motion to refer the House message to the Homeland Security Committee with instructions to report back forthwith with an amendment.
The clerk will report.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to refer the House message on S-2038 to the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs with amendment numbered 1942.
I ask for the yeas and nays, Mr. President.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have an amendment with my instructions, which has also been filed at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment number 1943 to the instructions of the motion to refer the House message on S-2038.
On that, Mr. President, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment to my instructions, which is also at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1944 to amendment numbered 1943.
I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived with respect to the cloture motion that I've just filed.
Without objection.
I now suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Reed, I withdraw that.
The senator withholds his suggestion.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Senator Reed be recognized for 2 minutes. Senator Landrieu for 2 minutes. Do we need time on this side? Okay. I ask consent that those two senators be recognized.
Without objection.
I thank the majority leader. Mr. President, I rise today because in a moment voting on the Reed-Landrieu-Levin substitute amendment, this legislation corrects glaring defects in the House proposed bill on so-called jobs bill. It protects investors. It allows capital formation, but it does not do that at the expense of investors. We have taken all the major provisions of the House bill with respect to the IPO on-ramp. We've not deleted them. We've improved them. We've lowered the threshold in terms of the size of the business so that these IPO off-ramps can be designed for small businesses, not for businesses with $1 billion in annual revenues. We've gone ahead and we've looked at the aspects of Regulation A in the House, and we agree that there should be an increase in the limit from $5 million to $50 million, but we've made improvements. For example, the House bill will allow people to solicit these securities under Regulation A without audited financials. I think at a minimum, the investing public should have some audited financials to rely upon. We have taken provisions with respect to the ability to go dark, the ability to stop reporting if you have 2,000 or less record owners. We've raised the limit from the existing one to 750 beneficial owners, but we haven't opened it up broadly so that large companies, well-known companies, could suddenly stop reporting on a routine basis their financial information. We've looked at the Reg D offerings in terms of what is a private offering versus what is a public offering, and we've given the Securities and Exchange Commission the ability in this age of the Internet and of Twitter to make adjustments so that a private offering under Reg D won't be compromised because it gets into the media through Twitter, et cetera, but we haven't opened it up to general solicitation as the House bill does. And by the way, our bill actually tries to create jobs, not just opportunities to raise funds through Wall Street. With Senator Landrieu's help, we have strong small business provisions in there. We include the Ex-Im Bank provisions of Senator Cantwell. We work very closely with Senator Merkley and Senator Bennett and Senator Brown of Massachusetts to include a crowdfunding provision which is much superior. If we do not achieve cloture, we will see by default a bad House bill on its way to become law.
Has used 2 minutes. The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Madam President. Following up on the leadership of good senator from Rhode Island, let me say that there are many reasons to vote against cloture on the House bill, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I am urging my colleagues to vote yes on cloture for the Reed, Landrieu, and Levin substitute. We have tried to address the many concerns raised by the House bill in our substitute. If we vote yes on cloture for our substitute, we can then go into some more meaningful debate on the Senate floor, and this bill needs some additional debate. Mary Shapiro from the SEC said clearly that the House bill goes too far. The Chamber of Commerce even says there are concerns in the House bill. AARP is opposed to the House bill. Securities and Exchange Commissioner Mary Shapiro wrote last week, H.R. 3606 would remove certain important measures
put in place to enforce separation between research analysts and investment bankers who work for the same firms. These careful principles were put in after the scandals, Madam President, that ensued on Wall Street. This bill has flown out of the House. Even Barney Frank said that what we're doing in the Senate by slowing it down and amending it is the right thing. So I urge my colleagues, give our substitute a chance. You can vote yes on Senator Cantwell's amendment, vote no on cloture to the House bill so that we can continue this important debate in the Senate.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion, we the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the substitute amendment numbered 1833 to H.R. 3606, an act to increase American job creation and economic growth by improving access to the public capital markets for emerging growth companies, signed by 18 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on amendment number 1833 to H.R. 3606, an act to increase American job creation and economic growth by improving access to the public capital markets for emerging growth companies, shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Dement, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoeven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen,
Aye.
Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Begich, Carper, Conrad, Franken, Landrieu, Lieberman, Manchin, Murray, Rockefeller, and Shaheen. Senators voting in the negative: Alexander, Collins, Crapo, Kyle, and Shelby. Mr. Enzi. Mr. Enzi, no. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran, no. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Aye. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Aye. Mr. Leahy. Aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin. Aye. Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Aye. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley. Aye. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Lugar. No. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell. No. Mr. Bingaman. Aye. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham. No. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Inouye, aye. Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, aye. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Coburn, no. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johans, no. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cornyn, no. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Vitter, no. Mr. Paul. No. Mr. Paul, no. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sanders, aye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Isaacson, no. Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller, no. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, aye. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka, aye. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, aye. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, no. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kerry, aye. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio, no. Mr. Tester. Mr. Tester, aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Burr. Mr. Burr, no. Mr. Brasso, no. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, no. Ms. Mikulski. Ms. Mikulski, aye. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb, aye. Mr. Corker. Mr. Corker, no. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley, no. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons, aye. Mrs. Hagan. Mrs. Hagan, aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, aye. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey, no. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Florida, aye. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coates, no. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch, no. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Cardin, aye. Mr. DeMint. Mr. DeMint, no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, aye. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Ayotte, no. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mrs. Hutchison. Mrs. Hutchison, no. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, no. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, no. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inhofe, no. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow, aye. Mr. Blunt, no. Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, no. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, aye. Mr. Wicker, no. Mr. Pryor, aye. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, no. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Lautenberg, aye. Ms. Cantwell. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Hoeven. Mr. Hoeven, no. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss, no. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Feinstein, aye. Mrs. Boxer. Mrs. Boxer, aye. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, aye. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Mr. Harkin.